Welcome to Cooking the Books. I'm Frances Cook, and this episode is brought to you by Mitre 10. It's a little awkward to talk about pay rates at the best of times, but there's nothing like being officially in recession to make it even more awkward. The problem is it's also more important than ever. Whether you're a contractor or freelancer hoping to get a good rate on a new project, or a full-time employee who hasn't had a raise in a while, the reality of having bills to pay and the need for a fair pay rate doesn't stop. However, we all know some businesses have it tough right now, so it's delicate. Here's how to start that conversation and hopefully find a solution that works for everyone.
News Talk ZB presents Cooking the Books with Frances Cook.
I'm joined now by Simon Rooney from Find Recruitment. Now, obviously, it's quite a tough time for businesses at the moment, but also tough times for people. And there was a lot of talk before all of this hit that people were feeling their pay rates hadn't gone up in a long time. Now, of course, we've hit this crisis. It's quite delicate. So in the current environment, how much room is there to talk pay rates?
Yeah, look, it's a really mixed market that's out there. Some sectors are doing exceptionally well, and some have really slowed up and been affected quite heavily by that. I think we have to keep in mind that there are still some people on the 80%, some that have been subsidised by the government's wage subsidy as well, and then other sectors are doing exceptionally well. I would look at it that if there was a annual salary coming around, that conversation should still be had with your employer on that side as well. There needs to be a justification really for why you'd like that pay increase, like there would be at any time in any market as well. You might want to look, has there been any really notable changes because of the changing environment that we've all been in? Have you taken on additional responsibilities, or has your job title changed? And that can be a justification for that pay review, that pay increase as well. There's too. And I think most employers are pretty fair and want to make sure that they're paying their employees fairly as well. We can think of a couple of examples when I put this to my team, because we cover a number of different job families across numerous different sectors, that we don't want employees going out on the cheap to the market as well, thinking they might get someone at a cheaper rate, because it's a time where you might get someone in for a short period of time, and that person might feel a little bit undervalued, underpaid, and they could be looking around in a 6-month, 12-month, or 18-month time period, and then that employee's looking around again as well. So that cost of that side, and I think employers need to be aware that there is also at the bottom end of the market, in the sense that there was an increase in minimum wage back on the 1st of April, and that went to $18.90 as well. And then, to be again that fair employer, the living wage sits at $22.10 and looking at increasing again from that side as well. So it's been fair and negotiating on both sides. There is definitely some room, but we just be conscious of the environment that we're working in as well. If there's enough justification, then there should be enough of a reason to have a pay rise given to the right person.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there about where you need to think about keeping hold of these employees as well, because obviously we are now officially in recession and it has been a big drop in GDP, but a lot of what is currently being talked about and currently measured is, of course, there's a lag on these things, and that comes from when we were actually properly in lockdown and nobody could leave their houses. And what a lot of the economists are saying is, behind the scenes, huge rebound coming once people were let out of their houses. Activity picked up actually really fast, a bit like a coiled spring, just bounced right back. And so then the thing that employers really need to think about is holding on to those good people does become very important, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, they might have assessed who was needed in their company, and would have possibly made some unfortunate redundancies. We've seen that across a number of different sectors and different organisations. We didn't actually see the big wholesale redundancies that we might have seen from the recession previous, I should say, which surprised us in a pleasant way. But there is some pent-up demand. We certainly saw that in May and June, where a number of roles came through that we helped them fill again as well. And you saw Queenstown explode with a lot of people going down there, and so there there are certainly some good positive signs, despite the officially going into a recession there as well. But really looking after your employees, factoring in even small things like being able to be more flexible on what you're able to offer them, whether it's on hours that they can work, where they might be able to work as well. People have been through a lot of stressful times as a result of COVID, so there might be wellness days being introduced, something that we did then find ourselves as well. So some additional soft benefits, because there is a certain amount of cost of losing an employee, a good employee. The IP might walk out that door, or that rehiring, the training that you're going to have to invest in hiring someone new back into that particular role as well. So it's about us all being fair and taking responsibility and looking after our good people.
Yeah, well, I heard a stat once, and these things are incredibly hard to measure, so there will be different stats floating around. But one of the stats I heard was that it takes about a year for your average person to come into a role, find their feet, and start being fully as productive as the person before them. That it really does take that long to settle in, know all the people you need to know all the bits and bobs behind the scenes, the unseen stuff. So it does take a while. Let's start with the people who are in the less stable sort of positions. So say that you're a freelancer or a contractor, whether that's as an individual or a small business or whatever, when you're in those negotiating project by project sort of positions, how do you have those negotiations at a time like this so that you feel that you're being paid fairly without running the risk of just collapsing the deal entirely?
Yeah, I think first off, I think if you might be new to contracting, right? So you might have been a fortunate victim of redundancy, and actually, I can see I've got a good skill set here. I'm going to go out the contracting market or the freelancing market, or you might be well-versed contractor. It's knowing your worth in the marketplace. So obviously you can look at a rate, but when you're factoring in your rate, look at if you're an independent contractor. We have these conversations with those that are new to contracting. Bear in mind that you won't get sick pay, you won't get holiday pay because you're completely independent. That part, that's like stat days, bank holidays, etc. So your rate needs to reflect that as well, without being too greedy. Then that part, look at what the contract might entail. This is a new piece of work for me, or I'm going to upskill a little bit more. I'll be able to add a lot of value there. It's a short-term contract, or it's quite a long-term contract, which might appeal more on either side. Someone might want a short-term contract because they might be going away or doing something else, or they want that long-term stability added to that contract. Can flux on their rate up and down on that side. I think though you want to be mindful of. An employer might come to a contract and say, want to hire you, what are you looking for? And they go, I'm looking for $100 now. And they go, oh, we're only able to pay $70 now. And that can collapse straight from that part. And that's where there's a lot of value in intermediary parties, such as good reputable recruitment agencies that can say, this is really about managing both parties, about managing what the expectations of what the employer is able to pay, and they'll have a certain budget attached to a project. And then be able to communicate that effectively with different contractors as well. If those contractors build up a really good, strong relationship with some good agencies, they'll be able to get what those market rates are and where it now sits there as well. So it's really consulting with different agencies, finding what your worth is, doing some research around that part. And factoring in what you wouldn't be getting paid for, again, highlighting that being independent, being freelancer, you're getting paid just for those hours or those days that you work through as well. And then not to undersell the skill set that you have there as well, to show that what you'll be able to bring along to that piece of work that you'll be undertaking too. So that should be able to get you some way into finding your way and getting the right kind of hourly or day rate for yourself as a freelancer or contractor.
Nice. There's a couple of things I'd love to follow up on that. I mean, first of all, when you're saying to factor in things like holiday pay, yes, so important. And way back at the beginning of my career, the way that I started out in journalism was as a casual, the way many journalists start. And my casual rate from that employer automatically factored in an extra 8%. to include things like holiday pay. So first part, would that be sort of a standard sort of thing to figure out? And then second part, when you're talking about finding your worth and deciding how much to charge, how would you go about doing that? So two related but slightly different questions.
So we find what we might term as more on the temps side, the temporary side, they might get an hourly rate plus that 8% holiday pay. As the person might be a bit more senior, they'll be more independent contractors or freelancers, they'll have a straight higher rate, and that will include that 8%. That 8% equals your 4 weeks holiday. And then you've also got, I believe it's 10 or I think it's 11 bank holidays a year as well, so that's another 2 weeks. So that's another 4% on that side. So it's when you're working out this was my salary when I was a permanent employee, now as an independent contractor, it's about this, but just factor in that a little bit more to take into account that you won't be getting those holidays. When the whole country shuts down over Christmas period, you won't be getting Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Day, etc. Easter rolls around as well. We have Labor Day coming up in October. So to factor that side in as well on that side. As for working out what your worth is, for example, with Find, we have a portal called Find Talent that our clients, different employers that we deal with can go into, and they can look at different contractors, the skill set that they have, they're all referenced in those kind of rates. And people can also Google and have a look at what others are looking for, what other people on different projects are getting paid as well. So you can see what your rate should be as well. It can also be reflective of the different cities that you work in and the different sectors that you work in as well. So it's all about that research, asking ex-colleagues that might have gone out freelancing, ex-colleagues that are now out in the contracting space as well, what they are getting paid. And naturally, some contracts will pay a bit more than other ones as well, a bit more lucrative than other ones as well. Different other things will affect it. Maybe tighter deadlines associated with some contracts will push that rate up as well, or a new piece of technology that needs to be implemented, or new standards that have been imposed, reporting standards that might be imposed with clients that so they need this, so the rate might go up a little bit on that side as well. But again, it's making sure that you don't blow that deal by being too greedy, and maybe possibly an intermediary party can give you some really good advice, a reputable recruitment agency can give you some advice on what your rate should be, and other factors as well.
Yeah, so those are really good factors to include, because I think, like you say, talking to people is great. There have been times when I have found out quite by accident that I was getting paid substantially less than others. And it was just from having good chats with colleagues in various positions. You can also have chats where you find out that actually you're being paid very well and you should maybe zip your lip and not draw attention to yourself. So it can go either which way. So I think talking to people is great, and a really good way to find out not just what the sort of standard industry rate is, but the standard industry rate for particular companies is a really good one. And then you back it up, just like you say, with going out there, seeing what information is around. Even in the past, I have gone onto job listing websites and looked at certain jobs. Now, sometimes they don't always put the salary expectations on those jobs, but you can just put the salary cutoff higher and higher until that job disappears is a really good way to find out what actually behind the scenes the cutoff is. It'll be there even if it's not listed. And so finding these little ways that you can push and test and find out what it is. I mean, it is a little bit of piecing together in the dark, but it's just what you're doing, right? You just have to kind of feel your way through and see what you can get.
You get pay transparency, right? So I think it is becoming more and more transparent. There are actually bureaus set up in the Nordic countries where any company of more than 100 employees has to put down exactly what they're paying their people. So you have that complete.
How good would that be?
Yeah, and you have that pay transparency, and this trend has then been picked up. So that's official by the governments, the Finland, Sweden, etc. And then that trend has been picked up and looked at quite closely by other governments, including ours, from what we've been told as well. And it's not to say exactly that Jim, who sits right next to me, or Sandra on the other side of me, I know exactly what they're being paid or what I've been paid, but it will show much more transparency around what people are being paid in very like-for-like roles across different organisations. New Zealand, yes, we're made up of a lot of more SMEs that would fall underneath that 100 employee part, but there would be enough information there for you to garnish, am I being paid right? And no one wants to be paid, feel that they're being underpaid. And employers are being very fair, and they want to be seen as being paying their employees fairly as well. Looking at different adverts can give you an indication, certainly, what other roles being paid in other sectors and other companies as well is one way of doing it. The power of Googling and doing your own research as well. It's again having that justification. There's a plethora of salary surveys out there, so making sure that there's a good, high quality salary survey with enough depth for people that they data to give you an indication, is this something that I should be looking at, in the sense that was the right accurate amount that I'll be looking at to negotiate for a salary increase. And so I'd say coming in with as much information as possible would be key. I believe the Australian government is looking at setting up that bureau next as well. So I can see New Zealand following quite quickly from there.
That would be wonderful. I certainly hope that you're right, because that would be just so great to really figure out where you stand. Because like you say, actually a lot of employers aren't meaning to treat anyone badly. It just, A, it can get missed. B, sometimes when you think you're getting underpaid, if you could see what other people around you are getting paid, you realize you're actually doing fine. So I honestly think that pay transparency, so great for everyone. I remember I had a chat with someone once who does quite a bit of contracting, and she said that she always quite likes in negotiations to say, what's your budget? And, that's how she starts the conversation. But sometimes certain employers don't want to say a number first, and they'll say, what's your rate? And her standard response then would be just to name the highest she'd ever been paid. Now, as a little bit of a caveat there, this was pre-COVID. So you might want to say, well, I'll often charge this, but I know a lot of businesses are under stress right now. Let's talk about it. And I think having those sorts of quite open negotiations where you say, you might be under stress right now, let's talk rates, can also be a good way to just put your cards on the table and see how it goes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in the buoyant markets, that person you referred to might have gone right at that top end every time. There can be, even in the most buoyant markets, sometimes being discounted from being considered for that. Now it's more about here's a range of what I'll be looking for. I'll get back to maybe that intermediary party or recruitment agency like ourselves or anyone else that works in that sector will be able to say, look, this is be past what they're able to pay, or yes, that's been able to be matched by the employer as well. So being able to manage that communication and soften the message between both parties too. And it's certainly being paid the right amount is fair, and something that's really important. Can also want to look at the piece of work that's going to be, how will it enhance me getting through maybe this slow or quieter time, and how will it increase my skill set as well to make me more marketable in 6 months, a year's time when I do come out of this contract as well. So a lot of contractors take a view on it, and they do have a range of a salary or an hourly or day rate that they'll look at, and that would help them secure the piece of work and enhance their skill sets, their toolbox for future work as well. So they take a long-term view on it too, on that side. And independent contractors, when they're all lumped into a project, they might talk about rates and the likes. It's human nature, it does happen as well. They want to all make sure that they are getting paid for that if it's a like-for-like role they're doing as well on that side too. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think I got a really good piece of advice actually while I was still studying, that one of my lecturers said that he once started at a newspaper and said, I'm fine with that rate if I talk to my colleagues as I get to know them, and we eventually compare pay rates, because it's going to happen. Am I going to be upset with you in 6 months' time? And to the paper's credit, they actually increased the offer and said, we would like to keep you happy. which I thought was a very smart way of putting it in very human terms. And on that, I'd like to move on to the people who are in full-time roles, because that can be a whole other kettle of fish. When you already work there, you feel like you haven't had a pay rise in a while, or you aren't being paid the right amount for what you're doing. How do you approach that conversation with a boss who you're gonna keep working alongside, who you want to have a good working relationship with? How do you start that conversation so that it's constructive and works for everyone?
So you want to do your research and make sure, why do I feel I'm not being paid right? Why do I feel there's a gap between maybe what I'm getting paid and what others are getting paid in this company or in other companies as well? So to do that, you could do that on the Google side. You could do that by looking at those high quality salary surveys, because there's a plethora of different salary surveys out there. And then have that, and armed with that information, go into that conversation with your boss, with your employer, and highlighting what the difference is between what you're currently being paid and what the market rate currently is. They might not be genuinely aware that actually we are underpaying a particular person, and was never our intent to do that. If it's something that and they could address that rather than not, and I think really good, fair employers of all sizes right across New Zealand will do just that. There can be sometimes there isn't maybe that wiggle room on the dollar side, so you could look at other things such as, I'd actually like to have more flexibility in when I'm able to start and finish as well. There was certainly a strong march towards the 4-day working week, getting paid for 5. Andrew Barnes was doing that. So you could have a look at maybe compressed hours, but still be able to put out the same outputs from that side as well. Other things to consider is, as we're doing a Zoom conversation, there are people now working all over New Zealand for their employer in another city on that side. So we've seen a quick rush to that flexible working environment. So at Fine, for example, we call it work from anywhere. So it's not necessarily from home. You could be up. You could be out in a hut somewhere, as long as you've got Wi-Fi that isn't interrupted. You could be down in Queenstown and have a couple of days holiday, and the other day you could be working from there as well. So that employer trusts you, you're able to produce those results, and you can have more flexibility on where you're going to work on that side as well. So it could be that part. Or if there is, it could also be tied into performance related as well. Being able to show examples of where you've done some really good things, go into that, look back and reflect what you did for the year, because it's saying, what did I do for the year? And when you actually start to write it down and look at it, and that justification, or it could tie it into a pay increase in a certain amount of time when the company's is maybe in a more stable position, should it be in on shaky grounds, because COVID has affected a lot of organizations in different ways. So different options rather than just on the pure salary side.
Yeah, I think that's really smart as well. There can sometimes be other options available if genuinely things are so tight for the business right now. Being able to work from home is a genuine money saver for a lot of people, and can also make your life a bit more relaxed. I mean, that's potentially what you would have wanted the money for anyway, to add to your quality of life. So that could be a great one if you can lock in more work from home days, that it's not just when we're in lockdown.
Yeah.
And so that's a really smart one. I've also heard of people doing things like getting transport vouchers instead. If you would have used that to help, offset your commute, then sometimes companies can get access to deals that people can't. So it's a win-win. It's not as much money for them. It's still a good boost for you. So there's those sorts of things are great. I also really like what you said about taking note of what you've done, what you've achieved. And I think this is crucial. And I always have a show off file running at any point in time. And anytime I have something happen that I think is a big win for the company, I'll take note of it to make sure I don't forget about it, because your boss is busy. They are not paying attention to everything that you are doing. You are not their only employee. You are the one who's paying the most attention to you. So if you've brought in money, or you've had a spotless health and safety record, or you've been in charge of a big project that was challenging and brought in some good stuff for the company, all of that stuff is really important. And it's also, you're negotiating from your boss's point of view. And I think that's key when you're talking about this stuff. One of the most powerful things you can do is see the point of view of the other person, right? And talk in ways that matter to them. You might want more money so that you can pay off the mortgage faster, but which is great. And I totally approve of that. But the reality is your boss probably doesn't care that much. They do really care about what you're doing for the business. And I think that's so important to highlight, right? Things can get missed.
The value that you bring into that role is not to be underestimated. I think for us that's a really good point. Having that show off folder, it possibly goes back to that Kiwi tall poppy syndrome that a lot of us suffer from. That we're very understated as a nation. But if you actually sit down and go, well, what have I done? Yes, I was involved in that particular project, or I was interviewed by Francis Cook, or I was this or that, and whatever it might be, and just show that this is what I've actually been able to do and achieve, and a little bit, the over and above what was expected of you, that sits outside of just the normal job description as well. And look, it goes back to your employer will see the value of what you've brought in and won't want to lose you as well at that same side. So I think making a mental note, or even better, the show-off folder, or you might have a diary at work, something, just jot these things down as and when they happen throughout the year, and then nothing would be missed. And it comes to a salary negotiation. It could be an annual thing or something that you feel like you're a little bit underpaid. That pay transparency again, that you can reflect back and show what you've been able to, what you've actually done throughout the year to justify that pay increase.
Now for a quick word from our sponsor. Negotiating is one way to secure a better price, but with a Mitre 10 SmartMate cash account, getting a deal is as easy as swiping your card and putting in your PIN. A Mitre 10 SmartMate cash account is a pay-as-you-go account for business, trade and commercial customers that gives you access to trade pricing on a wide range of products and services at participating Mitre 10 stores nationwide. It's convenient and flexible. Apply online at mitre10.co.nz/trade. And I think you made a point earlier about, bosses want to make sure that people feel valued and want to keep the good people around. And I think it's really important to highlight that and remember it, because money is so important to people that when it comes to these negotiations, the fact that it can feel stressful and important can also lead to a lot of negative feelings in general and make it feel quite oppositional. And I think the most you can do to avoid that, to make sure that it is a positive negotiation where you're both trying to achieve things, is really important. I mean, I had a friend actually who was nervous and put off for months talking to the boss about his salary. And he finally brought it up after all of us nagging him for ages. And his boss looked a little confused and asked how much he was being paid, and then looked absolutely horrified and said, of course, I will. He'd been hired on a starting wage that was meant to be increased, and it had just been missed. And I think it's important to remember that your boss is keeping a lot of plates spinning at any time, and it's important to approach this as, hey, let's have a chat, and am I still in the right place? And here's everything I've achieved for you. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but I do think that genuinely most bosses aren't meaning to rip you off.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And with all the different spinning plates through with COVID, putting those plates on a different orbit altogether as well, that small things can be missed, and not to underestimate what someone's been paid, but if they have a certain number of people reporting through to them, certain different annual reviews might be for different people and their different start dates throughout the year times X amount of people on your team. Small things like that can be missed as well. So it's about having that courage. And to have that courage, I think you need to be confident in your data or in your numbers. So again, doing that research and just pointing out what you've done or what others have been paid in other like-for-like organisations there as well, to have a justification. I think that if your employer is good and fair, they will see that reasoning for why you're looking for that little bit more, or that justification for that annual salary increase. Again, it might be that change of responsibilities that they might not have been aware that you've taken on more. There's achievements, new job title on that side as well. And I think, there's a quote I read just the other week that people don't leave employers, they leave leaders. And so you want to be working for a really good fair boss, or a good leader, or a good manager of your team that really genuinely values what you're doing as well, as a good team member too. Because that person walks out that door and leaves, that they do take a certain amount of IP, they take a certain amount of skills that they've brought in, value they've added, but it can also deeply affect culture as well, that they felt that they weren't fairly paid, might surface in an exit interview or just from talk. And it could be talk around a few pints on a Friday evening. So why did that particular person leave? And then other people could reflect and go, well, am I being paid right? Or is this the right amount? Or am I being valued in an organisation? And that side as well. But again, it goes back to both parties being happy and being able to negotiate and just being paid fairly all around.
Yeah. And I think really good points there, where the more research you can do, the more confident you're going to feel about your case, and the fact that you can have a really good chat about it. You can do research on industry rates. You can make sure you've got everything stacked up on what you've been doing. Really good, important stuff. Hey, thank you so much. That's Simon Rooney from Find Recruitment. Now, if you want some bonus money chat content, or you have a topic you want me to look into for a future podcast episode, do get in touch. You can find me on Facebook, Frances Cook Journalist, Twitter, Frances Cook, Instagram, Frances Cook NZ. I can't always get back to everyone individually, but I do read absolutely everything. It helps me make sure I'm making episodes on the things that you need to know about. You can also subscribe to Cooking the Books. Make sure you never miss an episode, or go back, listen to old ones. Pretty much everywhere, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if this episode was helpful for you, then share it with a friend. Help share the money knowledge. This episode was brought to you by Mitre 10. Thank you to our sponsor for your support. Until next time, have a great day.